Hi, my name's Clare, and I am sharing some thoughts and experiences and reflections and contemplations that I've had during my cancer diagnosis in journey. So I'm sort of 9 months or 8 months into a year-long treatment plan medically, although of course I'll be living a very different lifestyle to the one I had before my diagnosis now long term. So really the healing comes from me. But one concept I wanted to reflect on today was the concept that we are already whole and we are already perfect just as we are. And that's something that's quoted a lot at the end of yoga class, poems, when we read poems, you're already perfect. But what does that actually mean? And I feel like I've got more clarity on that of late. Because actually, none of us are perfect. And at the same time as not being perfect, we are also perfect. I think this is my understanding now that I'm sharing in case it resonates with anybody else. Because, and this is what, the Bible teaches us, none of us are perfect. But then there's also this concept that we're already whole. We're already perfect, just as we are. We don't need to change. And my understanding is that both of these things are true. So when we're born, our spirit, we are born with body, mind and spirit. We have a spiritual self. And that spiritual self is perfect. And it's whole. And it's pure. And it's light. And it's God. And it's never changing. And it's beingness. And it's pure. And it's real. And it's unconditional love. And it's available for us to tap into at any time we want to. And that's what we're tuning into during meditation, this deepest part of ourself, soul, Atman, the all expansive, limitless, boundless, expansiveness, never ending, true self. And that's always perfect. And as we're here now, my recent epiphany is also that that's still up there too. It's out and it's in, and we go back to that. When we leave this heavenly plane, we go back to that perfection. But whilst we're living this life, we're learning our lessons. We're learning the lessons that we need for our spirit to evolve, this to reach a higher self, a higher sense of self. So the lessons we're having in this life are trying to bring us into a relationship, a very intimate relationship with this pure love, this source, this truth that's perfect. So, and to get that, we might need to not be perfect sometimes, because actually what I'm realizing now is that it's through the adversities in our life that enable us, or that might connect us to this truth, or that's helping us to try and connect to this truth. Some people reach it without having any adversities, I read, but I've had quite a few what we label as traumas, and I believe now I'm in my alignment and I am connected to my source, and I don't have any fear, and I have lots of love. I'm really connected. I feel like I'm in a very loving place for myself and others, without even having to think about it or try or do any affirmations or do anything. It's just there. So that's a returning home. That's returning to self. It's returning to source. That's when people talk about coming home. So, but we can still be busy in our heads and come home to our bodies. And we can, let our mind direct us, but then feel with our hearts. And all these practices are bringing us closer to home. So we can, even to hug somebody is bringing somebody closer to home. They're there. Reassurance is bringing somebody closer to center, which brings you closer to truth. So your breath helps you to come into the present moment, which brings you closer to source. And in a very powerful meditation, you might have a flash of being connected, and that moment of nothing else matters because I'm connected to source. But you can feel that connection as you go about your day to day. When you're fully aware of it. But in terms of us, but at the same time as being perfect, none of us are perfect because we're all human and we're all having a human experience. So we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and the human side of us isn't perfect. So you could think of the human side of us as being ego-led and then the spirit being God-led, which is why there's this constant interplay between coming back to God, coming back to source, coming back to love, coming back to light, coming back to truth. That's where our power lies. That's where our sense of self lies. That's where our higher power lies. It lies there. But we are still human, having a human experience. But when you are aligned with your source and with your truth, your human experience becomes aligned. So then you act more out of love and you act out of compassion and kindness. And if you don't, you recognise that very quickly because it doesn't feel right for you. And you apologise, or you make it right, or you try and lead by example. You know, so that and that's this path that we're on. So it's okay not to be perfect, is what I'm kind of trying to say. So when we're saying you're already whole, you're already perfect, that is true. Your deepest self, your true self, is already whole and perfect. But we are also human, and humans are imperfect. And when we connect to source, we can tune into that perfection. So, and it's not perfection as in my house must be perfectly, clean all the time, or I'm a bad person. It's not about that. Any teaching that projects any kind of conflict, fear is the big one, but conflict, you're not good enough, that's not spiritual teaching from my experience. That is coming from a place of wanting to control, which isn't unconditional love. So any true spiritual teaching is coming off a place from unconditional love. And whilst you might offer guidance or offer suggestions, you're still giving somebody the choice to make. And that's what I teach on the yoga teacher training, is the power of language. We can make suggestions and we can share ideas and we can make observations, and from those observations, actually, because we've got a bit of experience, we might offer something that but then we ultimately let that person decide if they want to try that, and if they do, ask them how does that make them feel, and then you're empowering somebody else. So any spiritual teaching that's saying, if you don't do this, this is going to happen to you. If you don't do as you're told, I'm going to smack you. If, I know best, I'm the adult, I know better than you. All those kinds of teachings, whether they're coming from the church, the school, your parenting, they're all limiting. They're all putting, making you feel like, they're all taking you away from your personal power. And there is this sense of, then we take on board those patterns of we're not being good enough, or I don't know how to make a decision for myself, or if I don't please you, I'm going to get criticised, so I'm going to become a pleaser. Whatever it is, whatever the story is, but what we can free ourselves in the knowledge of and understand when we're connected to our source is that they are coming from their stories of projections, their samskaras, what's been put on them. So they're coming from often, not always, but often they're coming from good intentions, and they're subconscious. They don't know that they're putting those conditions and patterns on you. So when you can see that, then you can have compassion, because you know that they're coming from a place of subconscious or of samskaras that they are still carrying, that they have not yet been able to resolve. And when you're in your alignment, you don't need anybody else's approval. You don't need to please anybody else, because you're connected to your source directly. And that is empowering. That is personal power. And that is where you are connecting to your perfectness, your wholeness, your goodness, your source, your high vibration. And then you don't need to take anybody else down. You don't need to make anybody else feel bad. You don't need to control anybody else. You don't need to. So anybody that is making you feel like that is out of their alignment hugely, and often subconsciously. And they have even if they're not showing it, there must be a conflict there. And as I'm talking this, I'm kind of almost going, oh yeah, of course. We read all about these things. There's loads of quotes that we take on board, but have we realised it? Have we experienced it? And that's where I'm coming from now. And it instantly changes everything. That's the epiphany. So I don't know if this is helping anybody have that realisation that they might then have an epiphany or not. I hope it does. But when you are in your alignment and you're connected, you are moving towards your whole, towards your goodness, towards your perfection. But I think it's also, I see a lot of people who are self-sabotaging. They have good intentions. They're coming from a good place, but actually there's also a lack of self-esteem. So rather than, you've kind of got the arrogance on one side when people are out of alignment, but then there's this self-sabotage and lack of self-esteem on the other. And they're both different forms of imbalances. They're both different forms of not being connected to source and to your perfection. And I don't mean perfection in the way we perceive it to be, oh, I'm perfect. It's that your wholeness. It's your ability to love, basically, yourself and others without condition. And acceptance. It's accepting you for yourself and others for themselves without condition. That's when you're connected to source. And because we all slip away from that sometimes, that's when we're not perfect. So, if you've got a story that you're not perfect, that's been projected onto you, that's come from somebody else's projection. So you can drop it, keep meditating, connect to source, and you can let all of that go and then find your balance and find your vibrational frequency. And for me, that's where chakra, there's a chakra imbalance when you're there, when you're not in your personal power, but it isn't you. And that I guess is where this whole idea of perfection comes from. You are perfect, but the stories and the samskaras and the outdated beliefs and the projections that have been put on you have led you to to be feeling imperfect. And then perhaps that's, you've got some subconscious patterning that's bringing you away from your perfection. But at source, you are perfect. You are whole. There's nothing, you are enough. So it's dropping the stories that tell you otherwise to bring you back to your perfection. That's how I'm seeing, the teachings now where I'm at, or living that. And that's very empowering. So this is perhaps just a different way of tuning into it. But any chakra meditation is going to help, and any meditation is going to help. Any movement practice, any dynamic physical yoga practice. So I've been doing Mysore for many years, and then when you reach, you're peeling back those layers through samskaras. But for me, this has been a very direct route. It's been, I was doing Ashtanga Mysore 5 mornings a week for 90 minutes a morning, and all that's led me to this. But the epiphany that I've had, it's direct in a moment. And I guess that can happen at any time, but I'm hoping by sharing my thoughts and what's come up for me and my experience, that it might turn a light bulb on for other people and ultimately help them to heal. Because yoga is a healing system, really. It's healing. Any energy work is healing, any spiritual. Jesus was a healer. He's trying to heal. So if there's any person teaching you that if you don't do something, you're going to go to hell, or you're going to, you're bad, you're a bad person if you don't, if you don't have all your chemotherapy, you're a bad person if you don't turn up to church every Sunday. That, from my experience, and that's all I can speak from, there's no judgment, but from my experience, that's not healing. And Jesus was a healer, Buddha, the big yogis. Healing. And what is healing? Really, any sort of healing is connecting you back to your perfection, your wholeness, your love, your capacity for unconditional love for yourself and others. And that's the path to healing. So when you're doing your cancer, you can be having as much nutrition as you like, and it's going to help. It absolutely is going to help. But if you're also not working on your self-love or your connection to your perfection, that rhymes, connection to your perfection. If you're not working on that, or you're not moving towards that realization, then that will, I believe, or could that could influence the path. So so look at everything with eyes of a child. Be curious. Don't come in from a place of fear and helplessness. Come from a place of opportunity to connect with your own source of unconditional love for yourself. How amazing is that? That's what you have. That's available to you at any time, no matter what is going on in your life. Yeah, and that's where the power lies with any adversity on the path. The power lies with your ability to choose. And actually, this just came through for me, and I've read it before. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. And that was Viktor Frankl that wrote that. So I'm using cancer diagnosis as an example, but this can be for any adversity in your life, any life situation that we label as bad. Why can't it become the best thing that's ever happened to you? Why can't it present to you opportunities for growth and freedom? Because it does. And it's the way you respond that determine that. And I learned that throughout my divorce, but it took time. It didn't come straight away, and it didn't come naturally, but it came alongside a lot of yoga practice and meditation, and it, and that trying to put space before your response. These are all really significant and powerful practices. But when you connect to your source as your own higher power directly, that's your intimate relationship with God. You're connecting to yourself, actually. But when you're there, then it's that you're free. You are free. But in the meantime, small steps, and empower yourself and know that you are making your choices. If you go to the chemotherapy department to have chemotherapy, knowing that you've chosen that for yourself, you're going to have a much different experience than if you go thinking, oh my God, I'm dreading this, it's going to be awful and I've got to have it because I haven't got a choice, because I've got cancer and it's not fair. And you're entitled to have those thoughts. They're valid, but if we can drop those as soon as we can, drop the fear, drop them, go into meditation and connect with your source, connect with your truth, and ask curious questions. What do you want me to do with this? Or what's best for me right now? What would serve me the best? And going on that side. So that's self-care then you're coming into it and what you need more than anything else is self-care and self-love when you're going through any kind of imbalance, which is what cancer is. It's an imbalance. So you are already perfect, you are already whole, but our human conditioning pulls us away from that. And there are techniques to pull us back to that through meditation practices. I've got an online platform if you're interested in practicing, but there's lots of different tools available to bring you back to the reality that you are already whole and perfect, and that it's our conditioning that moves us away from that. So I hope this helps in some way. I'm hoping to make spiritual teachings, I guess, very accessible for anybody to understand. And that you can always help yourself, no matter what. And you can free yourself no matter what. So I hope this has been informative in some way. And I'm sending you all lots of healing light, lots of healing love. And hopefully you'll hear from me in the next video.